So I was bored and needed to find a topic for a new video, and stumbled across an old post in my Tumblr drafts that never saw the light of day, so I decided, you know what? Let's shape that into something. Time to read Fantastic Beasts and jokingly review it. Seriously, most of what I say here will be some light fun. Any genuine problems I have will be grouped together and moved to the end of this video, so you'll know when I go from just having fun to genuine criticism. Also, I'm currently sick, getting better but still sick, so if I sound off, that is why. First things first, I'm mainly working off of the new edition of the book, which was released after the first Fantastic Beasts movie, but I do have to say this anyway. This is not a school book. It is an alphabetical index of a handful of interesting creatures, at best. Which would not be a problem. I'm not sitting here expecting anyone to write a full academic textbook about the creatures that inhabit their fantasy world, even though that would be very awesome, but the context we have for this book is that it actually is supposed to be one. Especially the first version of it, which is presented to us not just as any school book, but specifically Harry's, with little notes in the margins and jokes and such. Which is undeniably charming, but also this fucking leaflet wouldn't even last through a month of classes, much less through several years. And, of course, the content isn't great for the purposes of learning either. For starters, it reads more as a poorly put together field guide where the animals are sorted by name instead of anything which might be useful for someone needing to identify an unknown creature in the field. What is written about these creatures also isn't incredibly helpful to anyone wanting to actually study them. We get 2, occasionally 3 paragraphs at most. Lifespans are seldom mentioned. When in the year they're active, if they migrate, hibernate, natural predators, etc., etc., and so forth. There's a lot of info about these creatures that just isn't there. I mean, even regardless of what this book is like in canon, the idea of one book covering all Fantastic Beasts that had been discovered by 1927 is kind of ridiculous. It would have been much more believable to be a multi-volume series. Anyway, moving on, my first pause comes in the foreword, where I do have to point out that Albus Dumbledore was not alive in 2001. Granted, we didn't know he was dead until 2005, but it's a little amusing regardless. Secondly, in the introduction, this pithy little book has the nerve to call itself an authoritative compendium of magical creatures. More on why I have a specific problem with that later. Anyway, moving on to some of the creatures that stood out to me in this book. I will be moving in mostly alphabetical order, as that is what the book is written in. Acromantula. First of all, who the fuck thought this was a good idea? What person thought it was a good idea to create these things? Give me a name. I need someone to blame for this travesty. Secondly, how have they not overrun the entire planet by now? What illness and or magical parasite is making sure that these giant monstrosities stay in manageable numbers? 'Cause, may lay up to 100 eggs at a time. Hatch in 6 to 8 weeks. There needs to be something naturally taking these things out, and I want to know what, and if I should be more terrified or just grateful. Basilisks. Seriously, you've got to stop creating these incredibly dangerous magical beasts.
Stop it. Get some help.
The Clabbert. No one, literally no one, asks people why they still have their Christmas lights up in June. We get annoyed, and we roll our eyes, and we move on with our lives. Doxies. I'm just gonna assume they are, like, a favorite snack of birds or foxes or something like that, because otherwise there'd be way too many of them to keep secrets, and let's just tag the fairy onto this point while we're at it. The hide behind. How are demiguises and ghouls so closely related that they can create fertile offspring? Also, I'll take images I now need scrubbed from my brain forever for 500, please. The hippocampus. Aside from how funny I'll always find it that a mythological creature and a part of our brain share a name, I will admit that tadpole might possibly be the most adorable thing I've ever heard, and I'd like to personally thank whatever pun-happy magizoologist came up with that one. On some more serious notes, though, the Centaurs' habits are apparently not human-like because they live in the wild and refuse clothing. That is just factually inaccurate and so fucking painfully British, I don't even know what to say. Which does bring me to the fact that this book is so Eurocentric, it almost hurts. Again, this would be forgivable if it was, say, Volume 1 in a multi-volume series wherein Volume 1 focuses specifically on Europe, or perhaps even the British Isles alone, but, again, authoritative compendium of magical creatures. This statement becomes particularly egregious when you consider, for example, that there is indeed a yokai mentioned in these pages. One single yokai. The Kappa. Just that one. The others don't exist, apparently. And, of course, if you want the most obvious example I could give, there are the dragons. Oh, the dragons. I'm really supposed to believe that of the 10 types of dragons in the world, 7 of them are native to the smallest continent on Earth. Like, Britain, on its own, gets two whole dragon species. Meanwhile, all of Asia gets just the Chinese fireball. New Zealand and Australia get the Antipodian opali, and all of the Americas have the Peruvian viper tooth, and nothing else. And apparently there are no African dragons. Like, this is so blatantly transparent, it's kind of ridiculous. Also, I am going to have to call bullshit on Newt being arrogant enough to think we've found every single dragon species there is. That is not the kind of thing a responsible scientist does. Just add known to the line about there being 10 dragon breeds. Just do that and you're actually fine. I mean, it's still iffy that 7 out of the 10 of them have been discovered in Europe, but at least you can argue that there are more to be discovered all over the world. And on a final note, hey Joanne, yeah, you can't have Newt
Please, you don't understand. Nothing in there's dangerous.
Scamander be both this person who is deeply kind, caring, and understanding of magical creatures and their plight, and also be the person who is almost solely responsible for the werewolf registry. Those two things do not line up. The Newt we saw, at least in the first movie, would be horrified at the very idea of the werewolf registry even existing. I don't know if that's something that's gonna be addressed in future movies, and frankly, given that I haven't even watched The Crimes of Grindelwald, I do not care. But I am pointing it out anyway, because it bothers me. Also, just, his wife is Jewish, and the registry was created in 1947, and I just... Then again, this is the woman who thought it would be a great idea to make Voldemort's pet snake an Asian woman, so what am I expecting, honestly? Thanks for watching this video.